Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all you members of the TSB Nation. I'm Rustin in Geneva with my illustrious world traveling co-host, Mr. Matt Stanley, based in
Dubai.
Dubai today. Hey, if you had
Yes.
Dubai on your bingo card, you can mark that.
Look, it's I'm responsible for jet fuel demand increasing so far this year. No, it's been look, I didn't go anywhere for Q4, as I mentioned in the past, but this year I have. And then in a couple of weeks we will be together in IP Week in London.
IP week coming up in London. Get your game face on for that one.
Yeah. But it should mainly be around Shepherd's Market for the week.
That's true. Yeah, that's usually the primary stomping grounds for most people who are looking to get together and meet up with members of the oil industry and discuss business and have in-depth, detailed discussions around supply and demand and
Yeah.
global freight, as well as might drink a pint or two.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's part of the week. No, but it's gonna be another. I mean, blimey, every year there's always some discussion point. Last year it was, I don't know, what would it have been last year? Mainly around,
I think last year was on the back of a lot of large earnings from a lot of oil trading firms because of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I mean,
yeah,
the payouts are fairly large last year. I mean, this year, we've got crude oil today at 82.20 on
yeah,
Brent, 77.10 for WTI, but kind of meandering range bound between 83 and 75. It hasn't seemed to be able to break out despite all the geopolitical tension. So I
yeah,
think probably the big talk in my mind is going to be either it will be around the geopolitical tension, probably around the Red Sea, probably
yeah.
around the Ukraine war, and the implications of Donald Trump potentially becoming the president of the United States in November.
Yeah, look, I'd much rather park Trumpy until later on in the year because it's I'm sure a lot of people will say that as well. But yeah, look, I mean, it's I'm not
Well, I
being
mean,
rude there, Donald, just in case Donald is listening. I hope he is. Probably not. I think last year, yeah, I think time moves on quickly and things get lost in context a lot, especially when it comes to the fickle nature of oil markets. But this time last year, we had China really just coming out of lockdown, which is crazy when you think about it. That it was, you know, we just had Lunar New Year. Happy to all those celebrating. Still are China off for a week. Happy Mardi Gras. Happy Pancake Day. I didn't know the middle of February could be so exciting, but it is, and it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, whatever that is. Um, but I think, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, people had a bumper year in 2022. Many traders made a lot of money, but with sort of stories are starting to trickle in around 2023 not being that great for commodities. I read this morning your previous employer, Macquarie. I mean, bless him. What's his name, Mister?
Nick O'Kane,
Who?
Nick O'Kane.
Nick O'Kane was one of the country's highest paid bankers, with the division performing exceptionally well under his watch. His remuneration, which reached 58 million Aussie dollars in 2023, exceeded that of the chairman. Fair enough, but he's just been let go. So he obviously didn't have that good a year, but I think he's okay. He's not going to worry about paying his gas for his gas bill for his Barbie or two. But I think you're right. I think the Dickensian hallways of Shepherd's Market will be full of hushed whispers of what's happening in the Red Sea. That was my best Arthur Conan Doyle impression I could muster then. But look, it is. I mean, look, what's dominating the headlines? What's dominating the energy? Worries about energy security. And look, we want to reiterate as the smoking barrel that there is no disruption in oil supply because of what is happening in the Red Sea and what is happening between Israel and Gaza, and the wider East Med region. No disruption at all in oil supply since Netanyahu's dismissal of getting around the table and discussing a ceasefire last week. I'd argue people are pricing in a wider conflict, and that was probably worth $5 a barrel. This time last week we were at 78.50, now we're at 82.50. So you're $4 or $5 there, and I think we'll stay between an 80 and an 85 range. But fundamentally, nothing has changed.
Well, and honestly, I mean, so the issue in Gaza has been going on since October. So we're already, 5 months into it, believe it or not. Um,
Yeah,
and yet all the talk of escalation and a wider escalation hasn't yet materialized to anything just yet. Hopefully saner heads will come to fruition, and there were talks this morning of potential ceasefire now that some hostages got released. Hopefully that does come and they can cool down the heated rhetoric that seems to be spewing further and further in the region.
yeah.
Um, but nevertheless, it's a tragedy, unfortunately, and it's something that needs to be rectified here shortly. I would hopefully see. But nevertheless, yeah, it has no impact whatsoever on the flow of oil. If anything, it's just created longer lead times of oil flow because people are avoiding the Red Sea and the Straits of Bab el Mandeb.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, my question would be is that the stories prior to beginning of February were that Suez Canal traffic was down 40%. Where are you guys seeing traffic at now these days?
Well, we've got a similar. I mean, it's very subjective depending on what kind of vessel. LNG, LPG is staying well clear. But look, I mean, the one thing we've just written another one this week, another blinder from our colleagues in Vienna, is it is context and what is actually the big concerns were. Say if you're a Saudi Arabian oil producer, now what Saudi have done, and the way their competitive advantage that they've got is that the Saudis have a pipeline in the eastern side of the country, which is on the Arabian Gulf side, at the Abqaiq, excuse my pronunciation of that, ABQAIQ. And that's a pipeline that runs 1,200 kilometers and it comes out at Yanbu, and it's their East to Med pipe, the East to West pipeline, and it can carry up to 3 million barrels a day of crude. And what they've done is that they've ramped that up, and they've been able to take advantage because what they can do is they can pump all the oil that comes out of Yanbu or Rabat and then ship it up into Ain Sukna and then take it through into the Med. And they're a massive advantage because your Somos in Iraq, your ADNOCs, ex Ruwais in UAE or Melbourne or Upper Zakum,
Don't have that advantage.
they don't have that advantage.
Now, just for those who are trying to figure out on the geography where Ain Sukna sits, it is basically to the southwest of the entrance to the Suez Canal, and it's the commencement of the Trans-Sinai pipeline, which exits out at Alexandria. So, just
Yes.
to keep your geography set, that's Eastern Mediterranean exports from that point. And if I remember my numbers correctly, it can do about 2 million barrels a day up from Ain Sukna to Alexandria.
Yeah, look, I want to be able to share my screen with you if you can find a way that I can do that. I should have sort of probably spoken about that before we went online. Because there's a map here that I really want to show that it really visualizes what look, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because the oil traders make money in times of peril or unrest or civil war. Very unfortunate circumstances that can people optimize in order to what's the right word? To make money out of a specific situation. And because of the geographical location of, say, people in the East Med, and I'm talking about Iran, for example, their only real outlet in the Med is one cargo a month into Syria, right? That's really it. So they're not obviously not going to compete. Iraq though, them one of their main outlets for their crude was through the Ceyhan pipeline into Turkey, and it would have been into the Greek, the Italian refiners, the Turkish refiners. That ceased because the pipeline is still down. That's 10 months now that's been down. And people like ADNOC or SOMO, if they're going to have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, it takes a lot longer and it's a lot more expensive. And the Saudis are able to capitalize. Because freight is weaker if you're in the East Med, because there's not a lot of fixtures going on out there, especially in the Red Sea. And Suez Canal transit fees are much cheaper. So there's a lot at hand for the Saudis, and they're capitalizing right now from a flows point of view on where their oil is going. 3 million barrels a day. I've just had this conversation with someone else actually. I'm pretty sure, excuse my historical ignorance, that the Abqaiq facility was a target a few years ago by the Houthi rebels. And that really did cause prices to spike. I think that was January 2020. And then the Saudis and the US responded with an attack on an Iranian general. Is that right?
That sounds about timing wise right, because it did shut down about 800,000 to 900,000 barrels a day of Saudi overall production.
Yeah. I mean, look, let me just, oh, can you enable my participant screen sharing, please, sir? I want to just want to show you this, just to give it some context, because the Middle East can seem somewhat geographically, it's to put it into context where oil comes out from, where the Bab el Mandeb Strait is, where the Suez Canal is.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Screen is
Here we go.
yours.
Can you see this, wonderful people? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Look, this is just very quickly the East-West Petrol line, and this is my colleagues in Vienna put this together. So here's Abqaiq, and I'm going to have to be shouted at for poor pronunciation. This is one of Saudi's biggest oil fields here. So this pipeline here stretches 1,200 kilometers into the Red Sea, which is here, and can do up to 3 million barrels a day. So you can see that there. Now, Yanbu and the Rabat refineries, 800,000 barrels in total, as well as having the infrastructure there to load Suezmaxes up here in Sukna, and then go bosh straight through into Alexandria in the Med. And look, you know, if you were to look at flows, I mean, you can see it here on our terminal, just on our map. Not selling, selling, not selling, selling, not selling. You can just see transits here, what's going on. So there's still a lot of traffic that's going through this area, and there's still a lot of traffic that's going through the Suez Canal. But arguably, there's less than there was. So this is the choke point here. This is obviously what's going on right now. And then this is where the cargoes are coming out. So the pipeline stretches from there all the way down to here. Get into contact if you want more details. But what you can see there is just to visualize it, what's happening, because it can all look a little bit daunting if you're a macro trader. What does it actually mean? What are things going to go on? Have flows, tangibly been affected? No, they haven't. And actually, what you can see there from the east-west petrol line there, the 3 million barrels a day across the country of Saudi Arabia, was it a hedge that was put in place years ago in case there were issues in the Straits of Hormuz?
I think that right there strikes the nail on the head. Is that, you know, when that pipeline was constructed, the biggest concern was the fact that Iran could shut off the Straits of Hormuz at one point or another, and so therefore having the extra outlet to the Red Sea played very much into Saudi's hands, and so building out that infrastructure was a natural hedge against, okay, if there's a disruption, we can at least still get crude to market and still maintain our own cash revenues.
Yeah, and look, I just find it, it's just what amazes me about the oil market is, 24 years now, and I'm learning. I still learn things every single day. I had no idea on that pipeline, and someone probably showed me. So excuse me, whoever showed me that in the past, and I ignored you. I do apologize. But essentially, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than we understand.
And it's very similar to the reason why the TMX pipeline in Canada is being constructed, because of the Keystone pipeline being killed by the current administration in the United States,
Yeah.
which would move Canadian heavy sands down to the U.S. refining systems in the U.S. Gulf Coast. Alternative routes had to be made to make the Alberta oil shale and oil sands continue to be profitable. So therefore, the TMX pipeline comes into existence, and that should start up here sometime in the next 3 months. And then you'll be exporting heavy Canadian crude out via Vancouver, going direct to China. So, imagine that supply chain going from U.S. Gulf Coast to China to Trans-Pacific, which basically reduces that lead time of supply by almost a month.
Yeah, amazing. And it is, and I think just sort of circle back on the conversation, which is fascinating is the wrong term, because the reason that we landed in these situations is because of peril. It's because people are, what's happening, people disruption, massive disruptions to people's lives. But this goes to show you how sort of resilient the oil infrastructure is.
Well, to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, oil finds a way.
Very good, blimey. Yeah, that was right out of the the annals in your brain there. Wow. No, but look, I mean, it's spot on. I mean, it's I think that this is the conversation that people will have. And I think more than ever, with what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, what's happening with the price cap, what's happening in, still in Somalia, there was a big there was an attack last week. 5 UAE soldiers lost their lives in Somalia at the weekend. Still civil unrest in Sudan. We've still got some coups in Central Africa, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on. More than ever, people are having to become a lot more ruthless in the way they're doing things and a lot more inventive.
Well,
And I
I think,
think
and I think
that,
you also have to be more attuned to what's going on in the world in general, because of the fact that, the Houthis and their attacks on maritime shipping has basically caused a resurgence in Somali pirate activity along the Horn of Africa. So that just pushes more ships further afield, further out, because, okay, now you've got a double barrel shotgun approach. You've got people from the north and people from the south. And
yeah,
so making it a true gauntlet when you're in the Gulf of Aden. But nevertheless, the impact, the only impact that we've seen to oil has been the longer lead time of supply.
yeah,
That makes it where any disruption in localized production makes it harder to rebalance the market once your production comes back in line. I mean, if you take a look at what's happened with gas oil over the last 3 weeks, there was a massive rally in gas oil last week when the Ukrainians struck out and hit three, over the period of from the end of January to mid-February, they struck 3 different refineries in Russia, uh,
yeah,
taking about 700,000 barrels of production offline, depending on how you want to look at them. But nevertheless, that impacts the gas oil market by 300, 400,000 barrels a day, and the high sulfur fuel market by about 200,000 barrels a day.
really.
And the
Okay.
market reaction was, a spike in rally on high sulfur prices and in gas oil prices, because nevertheless, the Russian oil, when it flows, has a market. And if those people can't get that oil, they compete for other barrels that are in the marketplace.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, look, it's a story that we've spoken about as well, in that who are the winners out of all this? Or who has gained the most in terms of market share, because Russia supplied, say, 40% of Europe's gas oil. I mean, if you look at how much market share the US Gulf Coast refiners have picked up, it's roughly 40% increase. And you'd argue that because the US Gulf Coast refiners can't compete with what's the Russian barrels landing into, say, South America, because Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, a few others, they can import Russian gas oil, which historically was supplied by the US Gulf Coast. The US Gulf Coast flow of diesel has got to go somewhere, and it's gone straight into Europe. I mean, if you have a look as well on what's happening with monthly European diesel imports east of Suez, which would be West Coast India and the Middle East refiners, really.
yep.
That's increased 50% since Russia were boxed in the EU. So winners, losers, gainers, I don't know. It's a right word to use, but the oil has flowed. Diesel went through a bit of a bad time last year when people understood and realized that there was enough of it to supply. But I think the gas oil crack yesterday closed at just under $33 a barrel, which is extremely healthy in Europe.
Yes. And especially for a winter that has not been as robust as people would expect, we still have a very strong gas oil crack in Europe. Uh,
Yeah.
and and again, that can be attended to the fact you have a longer lead time of supply, because a lot of those Western Indian refiners as well as Middle East refiners are going around Africa, so that adds an extra 15 days to the voyage.
Yeah.
You've got the again, the issue with the Russian refineries. due to drone strikes, which has taken that much incremental capacity offline, which again causes things to be tightened up a bit more than they should be. And you throw on top of that the standard turnaround period that's starting up in both the US Gulf Coast and Northern Europe. So you've got less refining capacity online to produce gas oil.
Yeah.
So those factors kind of come together to create a tightness in the market, which will take, a few months for that to be ironed out and flattened out and, rationalized back to a more realistic price point.
Yeah, I mean, the just sticking on the weather thing, that's a really interesting point. I had lunch with a mate of mine at the weekend who was in the French Alps last week. Was in Morzine, and he said it was 12 degrees and it was like slushy snow, and he could sit outside in the sun in a t-shirt, and it's the beginning of February. I mean, winter has been pretty mild there so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, and when I look outside my windows here in Geneva, the mountains are all still snow capped. But it has been a fairly mild winter. I mean, we did have a couple of cold spells that hit, but we haven't had a prolonged sub-zero weather spat. We've had a couple of weeks here, a couple of weeks there, and then it warms back up to, I would say our normal winter of +2 and +9 for the high.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to be cynical, as we are sometimes, winter buying season is nearly over. I mean, there might be the occasional snap. I mean, we're coming in now to maintenance season.
Well, if you believe Poxitani Phil, in his groundhog procrastinate or prognostication, winter's over.
Winter is over, Jon Snow. No,
Um,
but it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of people, but it all sort of leads on. I mean, we're not weather forecasters, but it does make a big difference because gas stocks haven't drawn as many people sort of thought they would, which meant that secondary power generation feedstock like a diesel didn't perhaps get the boost people thought. But because of the issues that you said, like the Russian refineries, and actually demand looking okay so far, gas oil cracks are a pretty good news story right now.
well, when you talk about the alternative utility fuels that could have been burned in Europe, the one market you have to look at is the EUA carbon market in Europe to get the full story. And that has gone from a high of $77 to
Per
50
ton.
per ton, EUs, I'm sorry, 77 euros per ton.
Yeah.
To today, it is 50, I think 57 euros is where the March contract is currently sitting.
Wow.
So you've had a 50, I'm sorry, 55.50 is where the March contract is sitting currently.
Wow.
So there has been a $20 drop or 20 euro drop in carbon from the high in December 28th, 29th to today. And so it tells you that there has been no alternative burn from any other utility source because carbon markets are being sold. They don't need extra, they might have bought these extra certificates to cover the potential of burning coal or potential of burning heavy fuel oil. They haven't had to do it. Nat gas seems to be plentiful because the nat gas prices seem to continue to move lower.
It's that's a very interesting proxy to look at power generation margins or returns based off the carbon market.
Now, the carbon market in itself is also, you got to think of also macro industry as well as transportation. And when you think that the European, EU manufacturing PMI has been negative, showing negative growth, therefore they're not manufacturing as much, therefore not running manufacturing plants or industrial plants heavier than normal. So you just have an overabundance of emission credits available in the marketplace that are being just liquidated out because they don't need them. And so it just shows you that the state of power and the state of energy in Europe is actually fairly well supplied, despite what the gas oil crack might tell you.
Yeah, I mean, look, just talking about refining margins and what's happening, and we've got Dangote still. I mean, we know we speak about it every week, but just a little update. 5 cargoes coming this month. Port Harcourt received its first cargo for a while. For years.
For 5 years. First cargo in 5 years to the Port Harcourt.
First feedstock cargo for 5 years. So that's new refining capacity back there. The Centio refinery in Ghana is running. It's about 40,000 barrels a day. They've got a Russian crude cargo on the way. I think should be there in about 10 days' time, something like that. All systems go in West Africa, it seems.
Well, and that, if you go back into the story on the gas oil crack, one of the major export markets for European gas oil was West Africa.
Yeah.
For both gas oil, jet fuel, and gasoline.
Yeah.
Now, the gasoline production at Dangote probably won't be coming online until summer. But that's part of the reason why they are probably bringing in WTI crude cargoes, because a large gasoline yield, and that will help them get their gasoline systems up and running and get them producing gasoline maybe by May is where I'm thinking they're going to be producing spec gasoline. But nevertheless, those refineries basically start scavenging away demand from the European export refineries. So all your refineries up in ARA that were mainly exporting cargoes to West Africa are, probably at the point where we might see an erosion in the refining margin because those localized refineries are going to take it away.
Yeah, and it seems like the it literally is the new world order for the gasoline market in ARA, because Antwerp did pass the bill about exporting more than 50 ppm material on the sulfur.
You basically have to export European grade gasoline from Antwerp and from the Netherlands refining systems.
Yeah.
Export substandard gasoline anymore.
Yeah, see, that's a game changer as well. I mean, look, it's not like it will just completely collapse. The circus will move on. It's just where it goes. I think people are still talking about it. So, I think that will be a conversation as well for a couple of weeks during IP week, that people will be actively looking for new homes for their gasoline, or a new kind of blend hub as well.
Yes, I mean, you can see a lot of gasoline has been, was always blended off of West Africa, taking West African condensates or naphtha sourced from other regions, blended on board ship to export back into West African distribution hubs. So I mean, I think that's going to happen. But when you have a very large refining complex coming online that's going to produce gasoline, it puts a lot of those economics into question.
Yeah,
So, is this going to be the year of rationalization when it comes to refineries in Northern Europe? Or we might see more refinery closures that are suboptimal refineries start getting closed down because there's no place for them to put the barrel.
Well, I mean, it's same as the Russian traders. I think will be looking for a new home, for a lot of their diesel exports, because a lot of their diesel has been going to West Africa as well.
Yes.
So it's we'll have to one to keep an eye on. Before we wrap up, what else have we got much going on this week, data-wise? I mean, obviously China are off. It's Pancake Day, like I said. Lots of people off. A very thin week so far in terms of volumes.
Well, actually, the big data point today is the US CPI numbers.
Yes.
Which are going to basically give an insight as to what is the US Federal Reserve going to do with interest rates. Currently, the market's pricing in 5 cuts for the rest of the year. The Fed dot plots has 3 cuts potentially for the year. And it's really going to be a factor of how is inflation reacting to the market, and does the Fed want to take their foot off the brake a bit and let the market move? I mean, I think the Fed's been doing a very good job balancing the market so far, but with the strong economic growth and you throw on the increased cost of freight because of the Red Sea issues, which hasn't yet rolled into consumer goods. It's going to take a few more weeks for those prices to start impacting goods in shops.
Yeah.
It is a case that will I don't see them cutting rates at all for this year. I'm still on the camp that I think they hold things where they're at because there is this inflation specter in the background. And they would look very foolish to cut rates in May, and then, oh crap, we got to increase them again because we didn't see this inflation wave coming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not as far-fetched as that. I don't think. I think that the March cut won't happen. May won't happen. I think some stage Q3, and then I think there'll be a 2 or 3 rate cuts this year. But nothing to write home about. I think it's definitely we've managed it so far. Let's not go over the top. Let's not test it. Things are still pretty fragile. And then let's see what happens.
Yep.
All right.
But nevertheless, this will be the last broadcast for 2 weeks, as we've got the IP week in Shepherd's Market. So we will hopefully see you all there, and catch us up for a pint or two if you want to have a discussion around S&Ds and around oil markets in general.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll be broadcasting next week, 19th. I mean, then we'll take a week off after that.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll still, regardless, if you like beer, you like to talk crap about oil markets, then listen to us.
Well, thank you all for joining. Click like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll look forward to seeing you all in London in 2 weeks.